Hello everyone, how's it going? It is Tyrnor as always, and I'm here with another top whatever list. This time it is my top 7 Warlocks, inspired by the previous top whatever list I did, my top 6 forms of magic. Now, why Warlocks, considering that, minor spoiler alert, Fell Magic was not number 1 on that list? Well, mainly because I always found villains to be more interesting than heroes, generally speaking. And many of the warlocks who are on this list are also some of the characters that I really like in the lore. So there you go. Obviously, this list is just my opinion. It is, as always, entirely subjective, and I have a few minor ground rules. Namely, if a specific character wasn't always a warlock or renounced being a warlock, then I will only judge the time when they were a warlock. So just to take as an example, Drek'Thar. Drek'Thar is an awesome character, but much of his later character is how he renounced being a warlock. So if I were to include him on this list, I would have to only judge the time when he was a warlock, which, spoiler alert, Drek'Thar is not on that list, on this list particularly. If I were to make a list of top whatever shaman, he might be, who knows. Also another thing, this might surprise some people, Ner'zhul is not on this list. Ner'zhul is my all-time second favorite character by quite a significant margin, but the reason he's not on this list is because the terminology of him being a warlock is really ambiguous. He's a warlock only in the loosest sense of the word. He is not the type of character you would see summoning demons in combat. He was more of a dark shaman and then, well, became the Lich King. So he's only a warlock because other people call him a warlock, which is the reason he's not on this list, even though he's number 2 in my heart. Also, another minor thing, there are no members of the Council of Black Harvest here, just because I find other characters to be interesting. If I were to name a favorite, I would say Xinin is my favorite member of the Council of Black Harvest, because I found his personality to be really unique and interesting, and, well, the quirk that he's mute is also really interesting. So yeah, without further ado, let's begin. Number 7 on my list is Archimond. Now, just a minor behind the scenes thing, usually when I make up these lists I go way beyond the number you see on the screen. In this case I went to 12 warlocks and then just cut off number 7 from number 8 because there was a pretty big gap between 7 and 8 in terms of my personal preferences. And when compared to the ones who were previous on the list, so number 8, 9, 10, etc., Archimond is the one who is least notable because of his personality. I mean, I had people like, the aforementioned member of the Council of Black Harvest, Xinin, or Nocturnheart on this list as number 8 and 9, for example, but Archimond does not really shine through personality. So why is he number 7 on my list? Well, I put him as number 7 because he is a character who really impresses through his power. In Warcraft 3, when Archimond was summoned, you really got the impression that he was a big deal. And even Warlords of Draenor, now, Warlords of Draenor obviously has many problems. But if you were to look at it from an entirely outside perspective and forget that the final cinematic existed, you see Archimond taking over command of Legion operations on Draenor once Kil'jaeden's more subtle approach failed, and he brings in the more brute force approach. And in Hellfire Citadel, you have this wonderful cinematic of him being summoned by Gul'dan, which is really well done. I mean, it's only about 20 seconds or so, but it really gives an impression of this guy is powerful. So this is the main reason why Archimond is on this list. He really, whenever he was present in the story, he brought an impression of this guy's powerful, this guy's imposing, this guy's a threat. We need to deal with him, basically. Otherwise, his personality is okay. He is the least interesting of the 3 Eredar triumvirs, whatever the exact term is. Kil'jaeden and villain are definitely more interesting and have much more fleshed out personalities. He's more of the brute force guy, but I nonetheless like that he is also very intelligent and described as a very masterful combat strategist. I mean, he did command the Legion's war efforts in the War of the Ancients as well, and his strategies almost won the war for the Legion. So there you go, Archimond is number 7 on my list. Number 6 on my list might seem a bit of an odd one. He's also the only ones among these top 7 who is not, well, he is a villain, but he's not evil exactly. I'm talking about Dentargh, Ner'zhul's ogre mage. So, because I can't put Ner'zhul on the list, I'm putting his pet ogre mage on the list. There you go. Now, Dentargh, I really like his portrayal in the Beyond the Dark Portal novel. He is a very loyal servant of Ner'zhul, despite the fact that he is an ogre mage, and yet he's still described as pretty powerful. I mean, he dueled Khadgar. He lost, but he still managed to put up a decent enough fight against Khadgar. Other than that, I do also like the original depictions in Warcraft 2 of Dentargh, in Warcraft 2's expansion, namely that he was one of the main ways through which Ner'zhul imposed his will upon the clans. Basically, he was such a powerful ogre mage that all of the clans feared and followed Ner'zhul's orders because they didn't want to mess with Dentargh. So he has that little bit of reputation with him as well. So yeah, Dentargh is more of a minor character, especially when compared with everyone else on this list, but he warmed his way into my heart, honestly, primarily because of his association with Ner'zhul. There, I'm guilty. There you go. Number 5 on my list is another perhaps odd one, though he's not as minor as Dentargh was. Namely, number 5 on my list is Necros Skullcrusher. So now, why is he on my list? He certainly doesn't impress through how powerful he was, other than the fact that he had the demon soul. Well, I like Necros Skullcrusher because he's surprisingly fleshed out in the Day of the Dragon novel. Now, small side note, I did do a playthrough of the custom campaign made by Outsider XC of the Day of the Dragon Warcraft 3 custom campaign on my channel, and in that campaign his role is greatly diminished as opposed to the novel, but in the novel, the Necros Skullcrusher is also described as a very loyal orc. Now, he had ambitions of his own, namely he thought that once he fully mastered the power of the demon soul, he could perhaps become war chief of the Horde himself. But other than that, he was very loyal to his chieftain Zuluhead the Whacked, even though Zuluhead had pretty much stopped responding to his messages and told him, "Quit bothering me for every little thing, figure it out yourself." But Necros is also very fleshed out in that he is described as a paranoid and superstitious character. He liked to believe that his fate was determined by the way he rolled dice, for instance. And nonetheless, he managed to command an air of authority even though he was crippled. And the fact that he was crippled was also detailed interestingly in the novel, namely he was a warrior who was wounded in the first war by a human, but instead of doing the quote-unquote honorable thing and taking his own life and not being a burden on the rest of the members of his clan, he chose to live, and he is rather embarrassed by the fact that he's a cripple and has a bit of an inferiority complex because of it. So Necros Skullcrusher is on this list because he has a surprisingly complex personality and he's very human, for lack of a better term. He is definitely not impressing because of his powers. The only thing that is noteworthy about him from that regard is the fact that he partly unlocked a way to use the demon soul to enslave Alexstrasza, and he was a bit of a dick while being the slave master of Alexstrasza, for lack of a better term. But yeah, surprisingly complex character, still a dick, but he's on this list. Number 4 on my list is, again, perhaps a bit of an odd one, but rather in the sense that most people think his character was done pretty badly, and I would agree, but let me just explain. Number 4 on my list is Kael'thas Sunstrider. Now, he was a warlock mostly after he died the first time, but also a little bit before, and his story is the fact that his story is so badly and weakly explained is one of the weak points of Burning Crusade, definitely. So why is he on this list? Well, because they tried to explain his story and it impressed me enough in the World of Warcraft Chronicle Volume 3. Now, it's not an ideal medium. I would definitely like him to be more explored in a short story, or perhaps more in game, or any other way. Because just having him say, "Oh, he was insecure about this and this in World of Warcraft Chronicle," was definitely unsatisfying. But at least it's something. So this little something is basically that Kael'thas was very insecure about himself, about being Regent Lord of Quel'thalas, and about King Prince of Quel'thalas rather. You also see this a little bit of this in the Blood of the Highborn short story, where when Kael'thas first returns to Silvermoon after the Scourge invasion, everyone says, "You're a traitor who abandoned us," and he feels very insecure about that, and he's constantly trying to do the best for his people, and yet he's still being crippled by this addiction to magic. And this is where Kil'jaeden comes in. Kil'jaeden basically severs the communication Kael'thas has with Quel'thalas. So the missives that hey, everyone loves you in Quel'thalas and everyone's hoping for your return and whatever don't reach him, and he slowly becomes more insecure about himself, for lack of a better term. He begins to despair, his hunger for magic grows, and he turns to fell magic. Kil'jaeden first contacts him at first as just, hey, the typical drug dealer thing. Just try this little free sample and then you can come back for more, and such. So Kael'thas is mostly on this list because he's a tragic character. I would definitely love for him to be explored more. The little bit we got in Chronicle is okay. It is a TLDR of what happened to him, but I would definitely like more. As to his abilities are pretty cool and interesting. His boss fight in the Magister Ceres was rather unique, a blend of arcane and film magic, I suppose. And his powers, well, he was one of the Council of Six of Kirin Tor. He is a very powerful mage, so he's nothing to be trifled with when it comes to his powers as well. Number 3 on my list is the Master Manipulator himself, Kil'jaeden. Now, I've previously said that I think Kil'jaeden is one of my all-time favorite villains in Warcraft. I certainly think that among the Burning Legion demons, he is my favorite villain, even more than Sargeras, and I think he was also a bigger presence, a more threatening presence than Sargeras in some ways. Namely, Sargeras was intimidating in the lore in the fact that, well, if he ever got access to Azeroth, we would be doomed. I just hit my microphone. We would be doomed because of how immensely, absurdly powerful he is. But Kil'jaeden, on the other hand, was intimidating because of he was a manipulator. His threats were much more indirect, and he was the archenemy of the Draenei for partly this reason. He could always send in the legions of demons, but he was charged by Sargeras with recruiting new members to the Burning Legion, and he definitely did not skip on any opportunities to do so. And I also liked him compared to other Legion big bad guys such as Archimond, in that when a servant failed him, if that servant still showed promise, he would give them another chance to succeed, because, well, that servant knows that if they would fail, the wrath of Kil'jaeden is not something to be trifled with. Again, out of the three Eredar triumvirate, I definitely prefer him over Archimond. Probably not over Velen as well, but he's still a very interesting character, and I like the little tidbit of regret he had at the end in his cinematic. Obviously, a bit too little, too late, but it was nevertheless a small shade to his character that I enjoyed. But other than that, his powers are obviously really impressive. I mean, he is one of the most powerful warlocks ever in existence. and I really loved his presence in the lore as well. Number 2 on my list is Chogall, which fits into the rule I mentioned at the beginning that I'm mostly judging him for the time he was a warlock. Not so much after at the time he became an obsessed follower of the old gods, mostly after the Second War. After that he was really underutilized in my opinion. But while he was a warlock, I really liked him because he was an interesting character in that while originally in the original lore he was supposed to be very loyal to Gul'dan, it was revealed that he pretty much served his own ends all along, and he only followed Gul'dan and convinced Gul'dan that he was loyal because Gul'dan was a source of greater power, which is really to be commended. I mean, tricking Gul'dan is something definitely impressive. Cho'gall was also I also really liked him because of his relationship with the Twilight's Hammer, the Pale Orcs, and the Void. In that, at first he just saw them as well, this is a way to prove that I am useful to the Horde. I'll bring these Pale Orcs into the fold. And then once he reaches Azeroth, he sees, wait, there are all gods here. Maybe these Pale Orcs are onto something, and becomes a follower of them as well. And he's a very sadistic person. I mean, he flayed Imperator Margok alive, if I remember correctly, or burnt him alive rather. Whatever the case, he's a very vengeful person as well. He is definitely very imposing and very powerful. And awesome in my opinion as well. I definitely think he was underutilized in the sense that, well, he was present in Cataclysm as the occasional mustache-twirling villain, but his character itself was less explored, as well as his powers. I mean, he was mostly a corrupted brute for the most part, who could also wield void magic, but nevertheless. Number 1 on my list is my good friend Necros. You can check out his YouTube channel in the description below. I'm just kidding. The real number 1 is
no one living has heard of the village of my birth. And no one ever will.
In contrast to the rest of the list, number 1 is definitely predictable, and I think a lot of people would place Gul'dan as their number 1 warlock in Warcraft history, and I'm counting both versions of Gul'dan here. Now, Gul'dan is both a tragic character. You would feel pity for his backstory, yet he is also one of the most evil individuals in World of Warcraft, and his powers are astounding at times. I mean, he summoned Archimond pretty much by himself in Warlords of Draenor, just as an example. I don't know what much else to say. Gul'dan was interesting both in his incarnation as an apprentice to Ner'zhul, as well as his retconned Chronicle 3 backstory that he was ordered by Kil'jaeden to infiltrate the Shadowmoon clan and thus became an apprentice of Ner'zhul and yada yada, betray Ner'zhul to Kil'jaeden, etc, etc. Both versions are very interesting, and I think both fit the character really well. His harbingers, as evidenced by the way I introduced him, was also really well done, and again, he had a really imposing presence on the story. When you freed Gul'dan in the introduction of Warlords of Draenor, even if you, by some miracle, didn't really know that he would become a threat in the expansion, it was a moment of, well, we kind of screwed up by doing this. What else can I say? His name, even to people who don't really know much about Warcraft lore, Gul'dan is a name that is imposing and threatening. Thanks to Hearthstone for that, I suppose. So yeah, Gul'dan. What else I can say? I can pretty much sing his praises to high heavens for many hours to come, but there will really be no point in doing that. So yeah, thank you all very much for watching. I imagine this list might surprise some people, though again I think number 1 is very predictable to everyone watching. So thank you very much for watching. I would also be interested in hearing if there are any interesting warlocks that you personally like, perhaps more than many of these on the list. I expect to see probably some members of the Council of the Black Harvest in the comments, and maybe there will be someone who will say, oh, I really like the Warlock trainer in Goldshire, I ERP with him all the time. That's perfectly valid response as well, and I thank you for your comment. Other than that, thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Farewell.